Good. And there's a little white box sitting up there by the camera. So we are now live. So now there's no doubt. Okay. Well, welcome to the Bible class, our Wednesday evening. And if you're on YouTube for the first time joining us, welcome. We are looking at the character of Joseph. We're going to start up in Genesis chapter 42, verse 17. I'm not putting every verse on the slides and everything, especially toward the end. There's a pretty large section of material that we'll cover. I don't know how far we'll go. These are, for one character, there's more chapters written about is Joseph. And there's so many things about his story. I don't know if you noticed, but on the slide, part 7. So this is the 7th class just on Joseph. Oh, I did 7, and I held up 6 fingers. I need to learn how to. So this is the 7th class on Joseph alone. And I keep wanting to feel like I have to go through, and I keep slowing down going, no, there's too much, too many great lessons that we can learn as we look at this. And it's kind of hard because if you got 7 classes already taught, how do you keep those all connected without jumping to the back? Started at the first again, and then speed reading through it and trying to keep that continuity flowing. So most, if you are joining us and you're on, this is the first one and we're in lesson 7, I recommend going back and look at those other ones. I'll tie in looking at last week's. In the first reunion that we find, Joseph is in power. He's ruling as really second to Pharaoh. The famine has just started. We had 7 years of bumper crops. He implemented a process of where they were collecting 1/5 or 20% of above what was being produced as far as grain. And so they've been collecting that, the Pharaoh's house. This is something that was unique, something that never has been done before. At year 6 of the plentiful years, he has 2 sons, and those 2 sons then reflect really kind of Manasseh was the idea that God has helped him forget about the affliction of, or the memory of his father and all the trouble he's gone through. And then the other one, Ephraim, is that I have prospered in my land of affliction. So there's this deep-rooted psychological connection that he's still working out, that he never does get past. And I want to keep kind of threading this as we go along, that when he came into power, there was a verse we came across where it said that he traveled Egypt. And I keep bringing this up, but he doesn't go home. He could have very easily. What's that?
He does not consider it home.
Doesn't consider it home. There's something that he severed. I mean, even he's given up on Benjamin, his only, blood brother, and his father that he was so close with, Jacob. There's something deep in this. And then looking at the name of his children. But so as he is managing and he's caught up in all this must, it had to be an extremely busy job running Egypt. And this at this time is no little bitty nation either. Egypt at this point is one of the pinnacle points of their day. And so anyway, they collect and they have this, and then we go through this period of time where they're coming into the famine. Now when we looked at the way he administered it, and that then as we come into the years of famine, that they're going to be able to survive possibly for a year into the famine. And so they have, everybody that's a farmer is going to be able to keep some. They know they can't depend year to year, not like us. They didn't have freezers. They didn't have storage places. But they had to really manage theirs. So by the time they come and the famine hits, there's been probably a year into the famine, to where now the people of Egypt were out. They come to Joseph. They come to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, go to Joseph. And Joseph then starts to manage it. And then we come to this point where it's not just hitting Egypt, but it's hitting all the nations around. And so I believe that Joseph is probably looking that especially looking at his family being nomadic and vulnerable to a famine as well, that it's very possible that my family's going to show up. And so he does, and he sees them, and he does not, of course, bring out the fact that I'm your brother. And there was a cultural transition too. Joseph has become Egyptian. He's speaking Egyptian. He's dressing like an Egyptian. He's also, another thing that I picked up as I was studying today, is that the Egyptians are accepting him as an Egyptian. Remember we talked about there was a historical period where the Hyksos pharaohs ruled the lower Egypt, and they were from Canaan. They had migrated over, and there's historical questions on how, but they end up overthrowing half and take over half, the lower half of Egypt. And so there's a time period of a number of pharaohs that truly were not Egyptian. They were more what they call Asiatic or Canaanite, with the religion and customs connected to that, which would also be, they were sheep herders. They were herders of flocks. So that's why we've picked up some verses where you find that that's an abomination to the Egyptians. Matter of fact, the Semites, the Jews, we call them Jews, they weren't Jews then, were very prejudiced against. The Egyptians did not like them, and I think that shows a part of their hatred towards anybody from Canaan, and because of what they did in coming in and overthrowing. And it's kind of that north-south civil war thing where you don't get over it, and it's kind of that hatred. And we're going to see that tonight. It's important to see that because we're going to see that the way that the household, that Joseph's house, and how his servants interact with the brothers. And it caught me because it's like they're looking very prejudicial towards Joseph's brothers, who are his brothers, because they're Semitic. They're Jewish. And they don't like him. But yet Joseph, he fits right in. So in that first encounter, he grills them, doesn't he? He kind of, and he's going through an interpreter. So he's not speaking their language. So he's going and speaking Egyptian to somebody who's then translating to them. And he is accusing them. What's he accusing them of?
Treason or something. They came to spy.
Spy. To try to find, and a spy is somebody who is trying to find a weakness to exploit. And that is one of the most heinous crimes for a country is to have somebody come in your country and look at weakness so you can exploit it. And they keep telling him no. And in that, finally, that defense, they say, look, we're just, poor little guys from a little family that's over here in Canaan, and we have brothers, and they go through and give a little bit of a history of the family. Of course, Joseph knows this, doesn't he? But he's starting to pick up on the information, but he keeps saying, no, you're a spy. No, you're a spy. And they keep trying to defend themselves. And, of course, they don't know he's Joseph. So he is just putting the pressure on them of this. And the other big imagery we saw was when they came before him, what'd they do? They bowed down, didn't they? And that's that dream. And then he realized, then it was like, we're talking nearly, from 17 to 47? Think about that. 17 years of age, they sold him off to slave. Now he's nearly 37. 37. And he hadn't seen him. They haven't seen him. He's grown a lot. And so, he's got a lot of reasons to be vindictive. Every reason in the world. He's messing with them in a way that is a little spiteful, but yet justifiable. This is not, don't confuse this as something that God is saying, Joseph, you ought to get even with your brothers. You ought to go ahead and do this to them. No. This is Joseph. And you see the character. That's what I want you to see about this. If he was so evil and hard-hearted, he would have thrown him in prison, had him tortured, and executed, summarily executed. Done with it. And then taken in an army of soldiers and had him go and get his baby brother, Benjamin, and bring him back. Remember, he didn't even go back. And now he's got his brothers right where he wants them. And he just, I can just feel the thoughts of him wanting to get vengeance and pulling back, because that's not who he is. That's not who he is. But he does treat him pretty cruelly. And he throws him in jail for 3 days. Now, that's something that I don't know, but I wondered if he spent possibly 3 days in the well.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. I tried to find some connection, but we don't know. But I wouldn't put it past Joseph to say, you know what? I spent 3 days in that well, and then you guys drugged me out and sold me off to be a slave. So guess what?
How's this feel?
And by the way, where do you think that they're at? What jail? The one where Joseph was.
I thought that one was for,
Well, he's Pharaoh. See, and that jail that he's in, you're right. It's the one in the household of Pharaoh, which would be attached to what Joseph is now. So that's what they would do, is the king's court would put these people in immediate custody in that same jail where he was living until he came out and interpreted the dream. So you can imagine the intelligence he's gathering, because he knows the jailer. He knows everybody down there. You know, now that's what I think is amazing, is we're getting such a beautiful story, but I can imagine him saying, I want you to go down and listen to them as they're talking. What are they saying? And they're terrified. These guys are nomadic. They're used to being out. And then their conscience is just pounding on them, because they didn't even remember whenever that dad said, hey guys, what are you looking at each other for? Go to Egypt. There's food down there. And they're all looking at each other like, you want to tell him? Because that's where we sold our brother off. He wasn't really killed, but their guilt is weighing on them. And you can't stifle that type of conscience. It's going to come out. So they're sitting for 3 days
Good.
thinking about this. So he comes up. He's got enough time. Joseph has got enough time to come up with kind of an in-depth plan. Joseph's smart. We know he's smart. I mean, even Pharaoh was stunned at his plan. And there's nothing that says that it necessarily came from God. We don't know. But he's got enough time to sit there. And so as they kind of stew over this, one of the things as they're in custody, then he brings them out. And I'm going to just read it here. You know, on the third day, they bring him out. And Joseph says, on the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. Now, there's this use of God quite frequently. We're going to see where later on he uses the word God. And I thought, that's kind of like one of those little things that if you're in Egypt and they're Egyptian and they worship all the Egyptian god of the Nile and the ox and stuff, and you don't like the Semitics, why would this Pharaoh, that's the way the brothers would say, acknowledge Yahweh? Wouldn't that kind of tip you off? I mean, obviously he thinks they're spies. He's not accepting them as brothers and then saying, oh, I respect your God too because I respect you. No. From their point of view, they would see a Pharaoh, an Egyptian, that has his own gods. And so for him to then say, like he says here, he says, you know, he goes about their God, you know, that if you do this, for I fear God. That word is also used in the sense of authority of multiple gods, like gods. I also fear gods. In other words, he's a spiritual religious person. Because I thought, man, that would be, because he does this several times. And I thought, and it's not specifically Yahweh. So he is saying in a way, without giving away, that he is also supporting or associated with Semitic peoples like his brothers by saying, I'm spiritual, I'm religious, I'm a superstitious man. I get that. And so if you want to live, this is what you're going to do. If you are honest men, which he doesn't think they are, right? Let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody. In other words, back in that prison, the jail. and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. So what does he do? He picks one of the most weakest things that he knows is going to prick their conscience. Because the last brother, what did they lose him to? What did they get rid of him to? Egypt. So now Simeon, you're going to leave him where? In Egypt. And it's a brother. And so this is all just more and more connecting to this idea of Joseph.
But he knows they're going to come back because the brother's there.
What's that?
He knows that they're going to come back because of the one brother that he's going to keep.
Well, and if they don't, guess what? He knows. If they leave Simeon, that's double. That's 2 brothers that you've abandoned. It's going to be even worse for them. So it's a perfect, what's that?
Why Simeon?
I don't know. I don't know, poor Simeon. Maybe they drew the short straw. I thought that too. Why Simeon? And there's nothing to indicate, did Reuben, the oldest brother, go, hey, sorry, little bro, but you're the guy. We're going to.
I'm thinking, is it because Reuben wasn't there when they sold him? Is it because Simeon was supposed to have stopped them, but he was the eldest and he kept quiet for them to sell him? I don't know.
I think if I would have gone back and really looked at his mother and the relationships, and because we know they were all there whenever he came and they struck out against him. Now, he may have been the most mouthy of them. He might have been that brother standing over the well, going, ha, look at you, and I don't know. Yeah, I would have done that. I would have picked the mouthiest brother that was talking so much, that was just there, not helpful, more antagonistic towards us, the situation, and saying, he's staying. He heard Reuben. He heard Judah. So even though Judah came up with, let's don't kill him, and we sold him, he intervened. It may be Simeon that was the most provocative towards, let's kill him. What are we waiting for? Let's kill him, And if I was Joseph and that was one of those brothers, he would be the guy. I would pick him to put him in and keep him here with me. You're going to suffer just like you were trying, So, but anyway, so the deal is, you want to feed your family, then you're going to leave a brother. Or you can go home and your family's going to die. And it's interesting because it was kind of the other way around, wasn't it? When they were at the well, it didn't matter. The family was going to survive, but Joseph was going to die and go to Egypt. And that's what happened. Now it's the other way around. You're going to let a brother die. In other words, you're going to leave him here, but you're going to save your family. It's backwards. So it's kind of an amazing thing by choosing a brother. And so and this is why I said between the days that they're sitting in jail and then thinking about all this, and even the fact of that trip all the way down there, remember we talked about that, they were very aware, Joseph, all the way down there. We sold him, he went to Egypt. They don't know if he's alive, they don't know anything about him. They are assuming, I think, and probably hoping he's dead. There's probably mixed emotions. We hope he's dead because if we see him, we have to face him. And he's probably a decrepit, broken down young man because of serving as a slave. And if we see him like that, then that's because we inflicted that on him. And if he's dead, well, we killed him as well. But what a mind blower, it's the absolute opposite. They can't see this coming. And so they, in verse 21, they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother. For we saw, listen to this, listen to the detail of the memory that they remember this about. For we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. So his blood, in other words, his life. Because of his life, we're responsible. And then Joseph is listening. Joseph does not need an interpreter to understand. They think they can talk freely. And unless Joseph turns to the interpreter and says, tell me what they said, then they're going to assume they can kind of chit-chat, but he understands. And that's what it says. And they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again, and he talked with them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Made a scene. Made a scene. So this is where we start to see something else happening to Joseph. Because this is the first kind of confession that he's getting from his brothers. The last time, there was no connection or emotional expression of what they felt on what they did to that brother of theirs. And so he's hardened in his plan. And I think the plan is going to change as he sees his brothers and what they're going through. Because what happens when he hears them express that? And just, he can see the emotion on their faces. And
There's
so,
regret.
yeah, and it impacts Joseph, doesn't it? That's important. That, to me, is big. He could have been sitting there kind of grinning inside going, yeah. Yeah. But he doesn't, does he? He weeps. A macho guy, somebody that was hard-hearted, that was callous, would have said, good, suffer. I'm glad that you realize my blood is on you. You just wait till I finish with this little plot of mine. But he doesn't. It's right the opposite, isn't it? It's the opposite of what we would do. We would relish in the idea and looking at what was going on. But he weeps. And he had to remove himself. He literally had to, turn away, or they were going to see this emotion coming out in him. And then he seizes Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So now they've got the grain, and they go home. And now another thing, remember, they didn't show up with just, a little basket to get a little grain. We're talking, a caravan. They're taking a year's worth, probably, of food back. So this is a lot of grain packed in on these mules in order to survive. It's not like, like us, I run out of ice cream, man, I can be at Walmart in 10 minutes and get me another bucket of ice cream, or run out of, oh man, we're out of tomatoes. Hey, Ron, can you go down and get some, oh yeah, I'll run down to the Dollar General. I got tomatoes, right? So we're not talking about this day and age. We're talking about a famine. There is no food within hundreds of miles. You're talking about a minimum, at good pace, a month probable travel. A month. So you're not going to make this trip every other month. You're going to take back a large quantity. And I think that's something that for years didn't really think about how much. Because I kept thinking about these sacks and this plan. We know the story, it's like, how did they miss that? But they have a lot. They're all responsible. There's 12 brothers, and they're taking care of a certain amount of camels or whatever pack animal they're using, because they can't manage them all. So all 12 of them, they could possibly have 4 animals they're responsible for each brother, that they're making sure they're cared for and watered, and they keep them going. So, so that now they've got to travel back, and they don't understand that this is gone. They've taken the money and placed it back into the sacks, right? And that's a terrifying thought. I mean, you get so far to the point they're basically home, and then they realize, we didn't pay for this. How did it get back? And they can't understand it. What would you think? I mean, it's not like your wallet. It's not like you pull out your wallet and go, I forgot to pay. It's back, and it's inside the grain. Somebody has done this. Somebody has put the money back. Who does that? Normally people steal from you. It must have been the most confusing thing to sit there and to see that. And so this is something they discover in 42 verse 28. And so he said to his brothers, this is something else. We don't know which brother found the first, but then they all discover it. But he says to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. And their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us? Did God really do this to them? I don't.
think they meant like we're going to die because this guy said we're spies. We came to take food now. We didn't pay. Like, oh God, why did you do this to us? Like, he's going to kill us, thinking we stole the food. I mean, I don't know.
And the fear that there's a bunch of Egyptian soldiers pursuing them now. And just imagine as well, when they do get home, every day they're going to have to worry about when they figure it out and count their money and do an inventory or something, they're going to figure out we didn't pay. And it's not, nobody's going to stop the Egyptian army from coming over here and finding us. So every day that they're eating on this, there's that as well. And their brother Simeon. And their brother Joseph. So this is torturous, if you think about this. And now they got to go tell Dad. They got to go tell. Now, remember, what does Jacob's name mean? Supplanter, trickster, deceiver. Isn't this whole thing almost like a family genetic issue? I mean, it's coming back on him, isn't it? I mean, it was God's plan, but it was like there's a whole lot of deceptiveness about him. His name's been changed. Now let's be nice. It's to Israel, one who wrestles. But his original name was one who supplants. And he was very deceptive. Remember his brother, his father-in-law Laban, what he did with the sheep and all this, and he ended up taking all the wealth. Of course, his father-in-law was just as bad, wasn't he? He tricked him because he was supposed to marry one daughter, and he ends up with the other one. I mean, it's just like this. And now it is magnified to 12 sons. All of this going on around him. And he is the one that is sitting there suffering as well because Rachel was the beloved one. And he showed a lot of prejudice and favoritism towards Rachel over all the other wives. Remember, he didn't love Leah. He loved her. And now he's down to one son, Benjamin, the youngest, and the other ones are gone. And he's ate up with that. The grief never leaves you when you lose a child. It just doesn't. I mean, you see that today, people who have lost a child. And they live with it. My grandfather lost a son in 1946 in Guadalcanal in World War II. And he passed away in 75, and I remember him always getting so emotional. And I know your dad, Calvin, with his brother. You don't get over it. This is something that is a deep grief that's there. And now nobody gets away from deception. Everybody. This is a part of sin as well, what you see. So they went to Jacob, their father, and they told him all that happened. And so for a little bit of time's sake, in verse 30 and 32 of chapter 42, the man who was Lord, they tell him, what happened. We got all the money back. He grilled us, and he basically says, the Lord spoke roughly to us. He interrogated us, in other words, and he took us for spies of the country. But we said to them, we are honest men. We're not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of one our father. One is no more. Who's that? Joseph. And the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. And that discussion must have been so emotional for Jacob to sit there and realize not only has he lost his son, but now he's got another son that's lost. And what's the solution? Was to bring back Benjamin. And Jacob responds, by saying, you bereave me of my children. He looks at it as something that what you have done. And they understand, they see that distress that he's going through. But he's not willing to let Benjamin go. So Reuben, when he tells him, we got to go back, we need to go get Simeon. Not for food, we need to go get our brother. And Jacob's like, no. And that's why, he says, you bereave me of my children, Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. So he's seeing Simeon is dead. He's willing to do, but he's not willing to lose a third. And he sees it as all this is coming against me. If I correct, he's about 110. So, he's lived a lot of watching all this happen. And the older you get, you look at your life and you look at the decisions you've made and you start going, I wish I could have, and a lot of regret seems to come back around on us. Now, Reuben pipes up in trying to find a solution to go back and get Simeon. And he spoke to his father saying, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you, and put him in my hands and I will bring him back to you. That is so ridiculous. Are you kidding me? I mean, it is. And every Bible commentary I was reading as well, it was like, that's why it was just flat out rejected. You really think that Jacob is going to kill his own grandchildren because the son? Oh, yeah, that's a great deal. Here, bring them up here, I'll hold them. And if you don't show up, I'm going to kill my grandkids because no. It's brash. It shows you Reuben. Reuben's kind of that type of personality. And but he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead and he is left alone. Notice it's almost, he sees them as separate families, doesn't he? Because, he said, his brother, they're alone. Now he's alone. Benjamin doesn't have his brother. Because it's a tribe. You got 12 brothers, and they're related by brothers, but they're so common and treated that way that it's like, it's by mothers. And so that's the way he's seeing this, and that's the mother he loved the most. So, if any calamity should befall him along the way, remember we talked about that? We talked about why he didn't want him to go. He didn't want Benjamin to go because, just travel in those day and ages. A camel could have tripped and fell and he snapped his neck. I mean, travel. So he's like, even if he goes, if anything happened to him on the trip down there, it's going to kill me. It's going to kill me. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to part from him. But it reaches a point because of the lack of food that they're going to have to make this trip again because the famine, and I think that the delay in this was the fact that they don't know how long this famine is going to last. Most of the commentaries believe that they're probably in the first or probably the second year of the famine. The first year, just like everybody else, they had enough food to kind of carry through one bad season, but then another one hits them, and it's like, uh-oh, now we're running out. And then another season of crops, and now we're out. We're completely gone. And so to make a decision to make a journey that far, you literally had to be like on starving. You're starving. So this is a little distance into it, but they don't know. Maybe it'll change. Maybe we'll have a bumper crop. Maybe things will get better. And guess what? It doesn't. So now they're back to again that they're going to have to go back. And so they're going to have to return back to Egypt. And that verse 1 of 43 just says the famine was severe in the land. It continues to keep going. And when they'd eaten all the grain and they had brought it out of Egypt, their father said to them, go again and buy us a little food. Go back. But Judah reminds him. Judah said, the man is Joseph. So basically, Joseph solemnly warned us, the man warned us, saying, you shall not see my face until your brother's with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. So Judah stands up. Now Judah is not the oldest. He's second. Reuben's the oldest. And remember that little chapter? Say again?
Judah the second or the third?
He's the second. No, Reuben's is the oldest.
Followed by Simeon and Judah.
Yeah, Reuben's the oldest, and that's why, like, when we look at the descendant, the genealogy, and you look at why Reuben, but Judah is picked. It's one of those kind of things. It's like the firstborn gets the rights and stuff. This is where it breaks down. That's why, like chapter 39, where all of a sudden you have Judah and Tamar. That horrible chapter right in the middle of this beautiful story of Joseph, that Joseph sold off to slavery, and then all of a sudden, bam, we go over and then we get this story about Tamar and Judah, and Judah's boys were rotten. And Judah had gone off and lived in this, so there's this whole, it diverts away, but it's not, because it's showing you the genealogy, the seed line. And because of Tamar ends up having a child that ends up being the seed line of the Messiah, and it deviates away. So it's interesting that Reuben is not, even though he's the oldest and should have, but he doesn't. But Judah's the one that stands up, and he seems to listen to him and warns him, well, I'm not going. We're not going to go back there. So Israel said, why do you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? He remembers. He said, if you just wouldn't have told him, then he wouldn't have put you in this situation. But, he reminds him. They replied, and they said, the man questions us carefully about our kindred, saying, is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? And we told him, what's the answer to these questions? Could we in any way know that he would say, bring your brother down? And that's legitimate, isn't it? How would he know? How would you know? You're trying to prove you're not a spy. And you're given, real-time, real-life family background. How were they to know? So Judah then, now remember Reuben's proposal, and this is back when they had food, was I'll put as a pledge my boys' lives, give me, and then he would say no. But Judah now says, send the boy with me, and I will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you and our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would have now returned twice. We could have made this trip twice in a year. We could have already done this twice, Dad, but you keep holding back the obvious. It's almost like, so he is pledging. The other thing you see Judah stepping up later on, we'll see whenever it gets further, he steps up and intercedes as well to Joseph when we'll see that. So he tells them, okay, finally in verse 11 and 14, and if you're going to do this, I want you to take a present, which is customary. It's an Oriental type of custom, was to go back and take with you a gift. And so that's what they do. And he tells them exactly what to take. These are things as well, the balm, a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, were also things that were more common in that region that they wouldn't necessarily have. It'd be like us going somewhere and taking what would we take if we're from here, New Mexico? Come on, guys. Chili, exactly. If you're going to go somewhere and you're going to give a present, and we would take, a little red and green. And by the way, we wouldn't take hot, would we? No, because they probably couldn't eat it. But that's what they're doing. They're basically taking a present down of something that would be pleasing, which is interesting because they have this famine going on, but yet they still have some production. There's some things. But the core food value that they would survive on is what they don't have. So take this back along with your money. And all that money as well, So not only are they going to take and buy more grain, but he's saying take money as well that they put back for the purchase of the previous grain with you.
1 and 12 says take double money.
That's double, yes. Take the money for the original purchase that came back and take money for the purchase, what you're going to get. Don't use the money, in other words. So, plus take this gift. So, but they're going to have to reconcile that too, aren't they? So now not only are they going to have this confrontation when they go back, by the way, what took you so long? You know, if I was Joseph, they go, what? Oh, so you're just showing up because you're out of food again, aren't you? I told you to go back and get your brother and come back, and I'd let him go. I didn't say wait for the next time you need grain. He didn't say wait till you're out of grain and then bring your brother back. He said, you can leave, but when you get back, you get that brother and you come back and I'll give you your Simeon back. No, they show up when they're starving again. Isn't that, you know, that's going to put them in an awkward position because now they're going to have to answer for that. Not only are we back and we got our little brother, but by the way, we need grain again. So it's like, yeah.
We only came back because we are starving.
Exactly. So the only reason you came back, not because of Simeon, not because you cared about your brother, because your back was against the wall, and the only thing you could do was you had to cave in and bring him down. So that's another thing. As they're traveling back, they're having to think, we got to stand before that man and reconcile all of this as well. So that second reunion is going to be something that's going to be very difficult for them to be able to look at. Okay, we'll get a little bit into it. We got about 4 more minutes or so. So they take that present, they take the double money with them and Benjamin. And they arose and they go down to Egypt. And, you know, the way that it's written is basically they have to encounter Joseph. You know, they have to go down and encounter Joseph. And this is where it gets more and more, like I said, I don't think Joseph could anticipate the emotional response he was going to have when he sees his brother. And so when Joseph saw Benjamin with him, he said to the steward of the house, bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready for the men to dine with me at noon. The man did as Joseph told him, and they brought them into Joseph's house. Now that right there is just already, now see, we don't know the culture, so it's different for us. But as soon as they got invited to come to his house, they were scared because they're Semitic. The Egyptians hate Semitics. There's only one reason you're going to his house.
Last meal.
Well, see, he doesn't say. He just went and got him. It's a setup. And that's exactly what they see. Look at verse 18. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. They're Hebrews. Egyptians can't stand them. And they said, it's because of the money. You know, they're going through their minds. Why are we going there? Which was replaced in our sacks the first time. See, they're still trying to work out how, you know, that unjust, what they did to them then. And they're trying to work this out. And so, see, here it is. This is what he says. So that he may assault us and fall on us and our servants and seize our donkeys. Now, we get a feel here. It's not just the brothers as well traveling by themselves. Remember, Abraham, he had 300 plus men. And so there's a lot of people as well coming down to help them with the animals and travel down there. So he sees it as a ploy. Yeah, come to my house for dinner. And then he's going to fall upon them and he's going to grab everything from them. So we'll go ahead and stop there and kind of come back and tie this back together because it just continues to get, I think, more and more interesting and as we unravel this reunion between the brothers. So I hope you'll be able to make it back if you're on YouTube and you're joining us tonight. Eileen, good to see Eileen and Terrell with us tonight. This next coming Sunday, we're going to 9:45 for Bible study. We're going through the book of Acts and we're looking at the sermon on Mars Hill with Paul. And then my lesson for Sunday morning is going to be Then God Remembered. Then God Remembered. So that's going to be my sermon title. I'll let that as a cliffhanger out there. And then in the afternoon, we're going to wrap up the prophet Zephaniah, which I think has been great study. Well, of course, I'm teaching it, and I get the exciting to study it, so I hope you'll join us for that. Before we wrap up, let's go ahead and have a quick prayer. Our most glorious and wonderful Father, we are very humbled as we conclude this evening of study, and we hope that it was something that each of us were able to take apart and involve it in our thought process and our in understanding the lessons that you're trying to bring to us today. And that we'll be able to make that a part of who we really are, that as we encounter people or different situations in our lives, that we'll be able to then act appropriately and use this wisdom that way. We thank you, Father, for all those who are joining us, all the Christians around the world. We pray you continue to safeguard them and guide them and protect us from the evil one. And we ask this in Jesus Christ's most beautiful name. Amen. All right, we'll see you soon.